Fonda is a Hollywood icon, and she's known for her activism as well as her acting. But her new book, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action, is out now. And with wildfires still raging in the West Coast, it could not come at a better time. Please welcome the fabulous Jane Fonda. Good morning, Jane Fonda. I was reading here you were arrested. Good morning. You were arrested 5 times trying to raise awareness for the climate crisis, and you say civil disobedience has to be the new norm. Now, I've always known that, but how do we get other people to recognize that this is what we must do in order to make the change we want to see?
Well, apparently there are 13 million Americans who are prepared to engage in civil disobedience and risk getting arrested, but they've never been asked. And so what I'm doing is going after the great unasked. Last week, Fired Real Fridays had 750,000 people watching. Now, to you all on the Zoo, that's nothing on the Zoom, on the View, but everything on Zoom, right? But for us, that's great. There are more and more people who are paying attention and wanting to get involved, and tens of thousands of them are volunteering. Get out the vote, registering people to vote, re-registering people who have been purged from the polls. People are active and involved. It's pretty great.
Well, you acknowledged in the book, which is fantastic, by the way, it's a guide to activism, that not everyone can or should engage in civil disobedience. People of color and undocumented immigrants have much more at risk. And you also write about being treated differently in jail because you're white and famous. What did you observe when you were in jail as a white and famous person?
Well, thank you for saying that. I definitely, my experience is not the same as it would be if I was a person of color, a black, particularly a black woman. There's something about putting your body on the line, aligning yourself totally with your deepest values that is very empowering. Even though you're having handcuffs and shackles put on you and you've lost all control, you still feel very empowered and joyful. And I would look around and see the other people with me. I could tell they were feeling the same thing. It's stepping up your game, and it feels good. And you know, the scientists who usually are below the radar, they don't want to be, you know, politicized, but they have come out saying you got to cut fossil fuel emissions in half in 10 years. And we need unprecedented numbers of people involved. And that's what we have to do. We have to organize and mobilize millions of people to force the government to do what's necessary. And I think we're going to do it. 3.5% of people is all you need to win. And that's 11.5 million people in America. We can do it.
Okay, so congratulations, Jane, on all your good works. I said it off camera. I'm saying it again on camera. I appreciate everything you do. But let's do a little politics, because you say this next election is literally do or die, which I totally agree with you. At one point, you thought you could actually appeal to Trump's vanity, unbelievable, to get him to address the climate crisis, but you didn't get past Ivanka. What happened? Tell.
Well, you know, this kind of man, if you get enough good-looking women there kneeling in front of him saying you can be the greatest hero the world has ever seen, it'll be huge if you just do away with fossil fuels and move us into a clean, sustainable energy future, and explain to him how to do it, that he would want to please us women. So I told Ivanka that, and she nothing.
Nothing.
Didn't go anywhere.
Well, you know, the U.S. is facing so many issues right now, the pandemic, racial injustice, the climate crisis. You write that they're all interconnected and that communities of color are disproportionately affected. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of levels to it. First of all, the fossil fuel industry very deliberately puts its infrastructure, its wells, its fracking pits, its refineries and incinerators in communities of color, thinking that these people don't have enough power to push back and complain. And as a result, the people who live there are getting sick, especially respiratory problems, which makes them extremely vulnerable to the COVID pandemic. What has brought us to this point in terms of the climate crisis comes from the same mentality that had slavery create the economy in this country, treating people like they weren't human and putting them into bondage. It's the same mentality. And so when we talk about the climate crisis, we're really talking about everything. An extractive, xenophobic, entitled mindset that has to be done away with. Because the crisis that we're facing isn't just a climate crisis, it's an empathy crisis, it's an equality crisis. So we really have to change a lot of things about this country, starting with fossil fuels and then moving to how do we become a caring country and taking care of ourselves and sharing resources and, making it so that everybody has a decent life and doesn't have to live in constant anxiety about whether they can afford to have a roof over their head and put food on the table. I mean, this is a moment, and we're so lucky to be alive right now, to fight a fight that can determine whether we go forward as a country that cares about people, or we become like Brazil and Russia, countries that are governed by strong men who don't give a fuzzy rat's ass about people.
There you are.